friends, it's Dan. Welcome back. Welcome to another plastic miniature review, this time for the Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago Snake Men, produced by Northstar. And I want you to know Northstar sent this to me to review with you guys. So immensely grateful to them for facilitating this review for us. I wanted to do this one next, actually for maybe the first time I'm saying this, not because I was very excited for this review, but precisely because I'm not. We just did a triple feature of the Dwarf Oathmark Dwarf Infantry, and in all three cases I thought those sets were fantastic. But this set really didn't excite me in the way that those did, both because the subject matter isn't really something that I'm particularly interested in the way that like anything Dark Age will interest me, but also because stylistically there were some choices made with this set, at least as they said on the sprue, that make it lean more toward the high concept fantasy side of the spectrum versus the more grounded fantasy side of things that we see from certainly from the Oathmark range, but I would say the majority of the Frostgrave range as well. But I want to give it a fair shake and show off all the details for you guys nonetheless. So this is a sprue review, which are reserved for sets that we've identified that are just one sprue repeated multiple times. So in this way we can look at the one sprue together and I can give you a very good idea of what's going to come inside of the set if you were to pick it up for yourself. Being a Frostgrave set, the Ghost Archipelago, I think it was actually like a separate range that they were trying to produce, because Frostgrave normally is a skirmish level fantasy game set in a frozen city, so everything's bundled up, covered in furs. They released 3 sets for their Ghost Archipelago range that kind of gives me more like Sinbad vibes, kind of like traveling through, warmer climate oceans. We looked at their crew, the Ghost Archipelago crew, and there's also the Tribals set that we've yet to check out. So the lizard people, the snake people specifically, were released in conjunction with those other 2 sets. But if, just like any other Frostgrave set, if you pick it up for yourself, the full box is going to come with 20 miniatures, so 4 copies of the sprue of 5 miniatures, and you're also going to get 2 copies of the Frostgrave 25mm round bases, which are produced by Renadra. And if you're new here, welcome. What we're going to do is go through this sprue in detail. I'm going to give you a breakdown on all the bits that are included. I'm going to assemble the miniatures. I'll try to do a little bit of kit bashing, but again, the subject matter doesn't really lend itself to that. I might try to do some like sci-fi arm swaps, but we'll see once we get there. I'm going to do some scale comparisons with other miniatures in my collection, and then I'll give you my final thoughts at the end. So that's where we're headed. Let's do a shot of the front and back of the sprue here and give you an idea of how they all look. From a production standpoint, everything looks fantastic. I've learned that I think it is just the Frostgrave range that Renadra produces. And Renadra does excellent work. They do work for the Perry Brothers, they do Gripping Beast. Basically any like flat bases are produced by Renadra, so they do wonderful work. And in this case too, from a production standpoint, again, we're just looking at like mold lines here, flash. There's really going to be next to nothing that needs to be cleaned up. So let's start up here with these bodies. You can see here there are 5 sets of legs with 5 torsos. I'll make just the one kind of generic criticism here that I said before, that the style isn't really something that I like as much. If you again imagine the sliding scale for fantasy design with kind of grounded fantasy at the one end, low fantasy some might call it, but I don't think that's quite right. It's more like Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, right, where it looks like it could have existed at some point in human history, even with fantastical creatures, as we've got here. We're looking more at the armor and the weapon design, and then you've got high concept fantasy with like World of Warcraft at the other end, where you've got big, oversized, kind of chunky looking weapons sometimes, some almost more like sci-fi elements, like magical floating crystals and stuff floating over shoulder pads and stuff like that. That's at the other end of the spectrum. So I view that not as a binary, but as a spectrum, as I keep saying. And so the designs here in particular kind of remind me more of the Warcrafty side of things, particularly again with the weapons, but we even see that evident in some of the armor that looks a little bit more, again, Warcrafty or sci-fi adjacent. But the sculpting is very nice. I think from a detail standpoint, you see you can get these little, like, I think that's supposed to be armor there, where the scales are. So you got these studded scales here. These, again, like kind of back straps, I guess, to hold the front armor plates in place. Of course, I'm getting some like Lizardman Saurus kind of vibes here as well. But they look cool. The only other kind of interesting choice, again, they're snake men, so anatomically I don't know what is correct or incorrect for a snake men, but it almost even looks like there was a spot here for tails, but I don't see any tails anywhere. So again, I think that was probably just a design choice to not include tails, but if you were after some tails, you're going to have to maybe sculpt some out of green stuff. And the only other kind of quirk about it is a couple of the legs have kind of like this one here kind of looks like he's folded in on the right, like kind of standing in a goofy way. But again, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it anatomically, since this is a made-up creature design. And I otherwise do like the like loincloths and the wrappings around the leg just to add a little bit of visual interest. That's one problem with like the Lizardman Saurus, is that other than some bangles and stuff that are on them, you're really not painting much else. It's just going to be, lizard scales. So I do like that. So for the Frostgrave philosophy, design philosophy, if that's a thing, I keep using the term anyway, has evolved over time, where we now see much more robust ratios of heads to bodies. I think the Frostgrave Cultist 3 that we just reviewed had like 21 or 22 heads per 5 bodies. And the earliest sets, and this one kind of falls into that category, had closer to a 2-to-1 ratio, and in this case it's exactly that. So you've got 10 heads to 5 bodies. You can see some of them are opened up, like in a snake ready to bite kind of pose. They're scattered around too, so you have those 5 up at the top, 2 more here, and then 3 down here. And actually, I think these heads look pretty good. I'm glad they resisted the temptation to put any kind of like armored helmets on them. I think that part of like the goofiness of them, we'll see once they're assembled, but it looks like these necks are going to be a little bit long. Part of the goofiness is just inherent to like, how do you design a snake with legs, right? Should it have a long neck? Should it have a long body with a short neck? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the correct answer is. But I like too that it's not just the same head design like this, just repeated 10 times. Got some of these little like spikes coming out. A couple of them have like collars on them. So there's quite a bit of visual interest here as far as the heads go. So that's nice. Now let's talk about arms. So let me pan out for a second here. You can see the arms are broken up into a couple of different categories, as we've come to expect from even earlier Frostgrave sets. You've got some ranged weapons down here. Got these 2 bow arms that appear to be duplicates of one another. They look, I think they're exactly the same, which is fine, but we've seen on other Frostgrave sets too that they tend to sculpt 2 different bows and include those as options, just for a little bit of visual interest. I wonder too if you could like bend these at all, because they look a little straight for me. But again, the design's a little bit high concept, but it would work. And you got 1 crossbow over here. It's also a staple of Frostgrave sets, is they include at least 1 crossbow option. Right. Then for regular hand weapon options, now we're moving into the very fantastical looking weapons here. You've got a number of hand weapons here. You've got 4 that are regular. Let me kind of zoom in and pan around. You got 4 that are regular right-handed hand weapons. So like kind of like club or sickle designs that are fine. Again, like I keep stressing that it's just not to my taste. Having like little wavy, jagged edges on weapons is something that might pop up in like a game like Warcraft, but it's not for me so much. Right, and then you have 2 left-handed daggers that could be cut off and attached to some of these left-handed arms that are otherwise ready to hold a shield, perhaps. And then you've got 3 two-handed weapons. You've got this spear, right? You've got this 2-handed axe. I guess it's 2 two-handed axes. Maybe just call them pole arms if you like, because this I don't know what that is. Call it an axe. Rounding out the sprue in terms of accessories, you've got these two shields, and I don't really understand the shield designs. I guess it's the kind of like Roman scutum design. Technically is fine. Like that is a shield design, and it's hard for me to be critical of more historical influences when I'm critical of overly fantasy looking weapons. I would have preferred maybe just like a round shield, right? But I think that's fine. And then otherwise, you've just got a couple of quivers down here for your bow and crossbow options. So no other accessories like we are used to seeing from Frostgrave sets normally, like pouches, things of that nature. That would have been, I think, especially cool here to have some maybe like additional jewelry or bangles that could be glued onto them in some way just to enhance them a little bit further. But that's what we've got. So as they sit on the sprue, I think from a detail standpoint they look fine, and I'm curious to see if I can swap out any of these weapons for some that might be more to my liking. So let me cut here. I'm going to do that, and I'll see what I can come up with for you. Alright, so I built these up. I only have 5 to play with here though, so I did 1 straight off the sprue, and the other 4 I did some moderate conversions on. So this is the one just straight off the sprue, no conversion work. And I gotta concede they grew on me as I was putting them together. I think they look more like snapping turtles than snakes. That's owing, I think, to like the bulbous back, but some of these mouths also remind me of snapping turtles, which we have here in the northeastern US. And so as a result, I kind of ran with that for the conversions that I did. By which I mean I cut down the necks a little bit. I think that's the only part that I found I just liked better aesthetically with the necks a little bit shorter. So all I did was just cut some of like this neck portion off here and just glued the head straight onto the body. And I think that that looks a little bit better as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if it's, again, correct for a snake humanoid hybrid. I don't know what that would look like, but I just like the overall feel of this better. So on this one, this arm is from, or the hand specifically, because I do recommend if you do any conversions with these that you keep the arms because they have this really nice scale sculpting on them. So I just cut the hand off of a Oathmark Goblin, and the shield is just a simple like hoplite shield, I think, from Victrix, which I also like. Again, I don't have a problem with a historically designed shield or influenced shield like the Roman scutum. I just don't think it's the right design for these guys. I think that round shield works well. Some more conversions here. Again, I cut the neck down a little bit, and then I added on, that's a like flail arm or club, I'm not sure, from the Knolls. Once again, I just cut it off at the wrist. And then the left arm is an axe from the Oathmark Orcs. So yeah, as you can see, I actually liked these more and more as I was building them, certainly with weapon swaps in particular. And if you've got like Oathmark stuff in your collection, you're going to have so many leftover weapons that you'll have plenty to play with here if you wanted to just ignore the weapons in this set entirely. And that little accessory bit is, I think, from the Knolls. I can't remember exactly. Here's another one, kind of a spearman design there. I think the spear is actually from the Oathmark Human Light Infantry. But again, if you pick up any Oathmark kit, other than the light kits, because I think that's like a standard bear arm, you're going to have plenty of spear arms to play with. And the shield is actually a Games Workshop Goblin Wolf Rider shield. If you don't have any of those handy, these, I think they're Persian ones from Victrix, would work as suitable stand-ins. Kind of like that design. I think if I were doing like a project based on these, I would probably source, those plastic round ones from Games Workshop, from their 5th edition Saurus. I think those would look really good with these. And here's a goofy one. This is a sci-fi one. The right arm is from the Mercenaries. The left arm is from the Automatons. So there actually is, I think, a lot of flexibility with these. And once again, I cut the neck down, so the head is pretty much glued straight into the body, again, to make it look more like a kind of turtle monster. I realized, too, that the design of these, I don't hate them. It is just maybe the necks are a little bit too long, and I don't like some of the weapons. But certainly all converted up like this, it reminded me of some kind of like Covenant, like from Halo, alien species. So I think especially some of these bodies with more armor on them, I could certainly see these in a sci-fi setting. Like, imagine this just like painted up like white, right? That would look pretty sweet and sci-fi looking. The only other quirk about them from a build standpoint is that, again, these are 25mm rounds they're standing on, just not the flats that they come with, but you can see they're the same size. And the only thing that's kind of weird about it is that you can see that the splash bases are wider than the 25mm. So they would actually work better on 25mm squares, because you could, you know, kind of angle that in such a way. And the torsos you can like twist around quite a bit, as you can see here. Like I got this one tilted off to the left. But at a minimum, I would probably just cut them off the splash bases if I was putting them on rounds. So anyway, in the end, I dig these. They look pretty cool. Let's throw them on a Lazy Susan and see how they scale up. Alright, time for the Scale-O-Rama. And I'm sorry to say that I don't have any Lizardmen in my collection anymore. I used to have both the old 5th edition plastics and the, was it 6th edition? 7th edition plastics? Anyway, I don't have them in my collection anymore, but I can give you a pretty good approximation of the height of these guys by showing you off how they scale up with some other manufacturers. Here you'll see the names of those manufacturers or ranges in red on the bases of the figures primed in white. And I can tell you just from experience that these are going to scale up very nicely with Games Workshop Lizardman Saurus models. I think in terms of height, they're going to be pretty much the exact same size as the old 5th edition Saurus, the smoother ones. But you can see from like a bulk standpoint that they're slightly larger even than the Mantic Orcs there, right? And in terms of height, they work just well with other fantasy ranges like Cool Mini or Not, right? You can see they're larger than the Skaven Blood Bowl there, about the same height as the Kroot. So they're going to work well. Actually, come to think of it, these would make good like Tau Kroot proxies too, speaking of them being kind of like an alien covenant race. Anyway, so there's a bit you could do with these. So what's the final verdict? This is a weird one for me because, as I said at the beginning of the video, it's not really subject matter that I'm super interested in. And as they come straight out of the set, the weapon design in particular isn't something that I'm a particular fan of. But if it is for you, then certainly these are fantastic options for multi-part like lizard creatures, because the price can't be overlooked either. These are like $1.50 US per miniature for true multi-part plastic miniatures. However, I also found from just playing around with them that if you're willing to put in a little bit of conversion work, you can make some really cool, like, lizardy. I'm even thinking about it for like pulp games, like a Cthulhu kind of game, right? For that kind of skirmish play, or in a like dystopian sci-fi kind of setting. I think these guys would work really well. But even as just classic fantasy lizardmen, if you're fine with the weapons that come in it, then, you know, have at it. But even if not, it's so easy to find, you know, shields and weapons, certainly from other Northstar like Oathmark kits, because you're going to have just so many left over from them, that I think with just a little bit of ingenuity and some conversion work, you can make some pretty sweet looking lizardmen out of these guys. It makes me eager to see what else Northstar could do with non-human or like generic fantasy races like elves and dwarves. What else they could do with, say, like a rat kind of creature, right? Bug creatures, stuff like that. Things that you don't see much from other companies in multi-part plastic. Or even if they just continued with the like reptile theme and maybe did some other variants of this kind of a kit. It'd be very interesting to see their more updated take on that subject matter. But regardless, another really cool entry in the Frostgrave range. Really grateful to Northstar for sending these to us to check out together. And I'm grateful to all of you for dropping by for this one in the meantime. And until next time, happy gaming.